Hey guys, tonight, we're leaving the noisy medieval battlefield and slipping into the quiet, incense-scented corridors of a stone monastery. You're barefoot, your robe is scratchy, and the only sound is the creak of timber as someone, probably you, is waking up way too early for anything good. It's pitch black, your eyes flutter open, but there's no sun, just the pale glow of an oil lamp swinging down the hall. The bell has rung. That means it's Matins' first prayer of the day, and it's barely 2 in the morning. Your body wants to stay nestled in the straw-stuffed mattress, but no. You trudge across a stone floor that's colder than your ex's heart. Your breath fogs the air, and your toes already feel like they've been cryogenically frozen. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time you're watching this. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle in line with other sleepy bros, robes swishing quietly as the procession heads into the chapel. This is your life now. Monastic vows weren't just about giving up riches, they meant surrendering comfort, privacy, and most luxuries of the body. Your days start early, end late, and run on a strict schedule known as the Herarium, which breaks the day into bite-sized chunks of worship, work, and very little fun. The chapel is dim, lit by sputtering candles. Cold stone arches loom overhead. The Gregorian chants speak are not performed, but endured, and you chant too, even though your throat still feels like sandpaper from last night's vigil. Welcome to Ora et Labora, pray and work. You'll be doing both, a lot, and don't expect a break. After matins you get maybe a sliver of rest, if you're lucky, before Lord's at dawn. By then, your knees already feel the toll. The stone floor isn't just a metaphor for your suffering, it's an actual co-conspirator. Now, you might have pictured monastic life as peaceful, birds chirping, monks humming with enlightenment. But medieval monasteries weren't spas for spiritual enlightenment. They were Spartan camps for souls under reconstruction. Minimal, the heating non-existent, the bed, a wooden frame, a straw sack, a coarse woolen blanket, and zero hope of back support. Even getting clean is a bit medieval, pun intended. Baths are rare. Some monasteries allow maybe one a month, some only on feast days, and when you do bathe, it's usually in an outdoor basin, in cold water, with everyone else waiting behind you, silently. And speaking of silence, get used to it. Some orders, like the need salt, better memorize the hand sign. The monks had an entire sign language just to communicate basic needs. Historians still argue whether this monastic sign system was the first form of European sign language, or just an elaborate way to ask for more lentils without breaking a vow. You'd think the lack of talking might bring peace, but it also means your inner monologue has nowhere to hide. Got intrusive thoughts, regrets from your old life, lusty daydreams about that one time you saw a girl's ankle in the village square. Better squash that, fast. The silence doesn't forgive it echoed. And then there's the constant ringing of bells. The monastery's bell tower isn't just for decoration, it runs your life. Every hour is segmented, and every segment means something. When the bell rings, you drop everything, even if you're deep in thought, or you hurry to prayer like a holy sheepdog chasing the divine schedule. One mainstream historical fact here: monasteries weren't just religious centers. They were also engines of education and agriculture. Many were self-sufficient estates with farms, bakeries, mills, and schools. That's a lot to manage for people who barely sleep. You'd think you might find moments of peace, maybe during personal prayer or reflection, and you do if you consider kneeling on a cold floor while confessing your unworthiness to be restful. But spiritually, that grind is the point. Peace comes after purification, and purification, that's the long haul. Here's a quirky little tidbit. Some monks believed that scratching an itch during prayer was a sin of distraction. So instead, they developed incredible willpower, or just got very used to being itchy. Either way, that's commitment. And don't get too excited for daylight. By the time the sun peeks through the slit windows, you've already done more praying than most people manage in a lifetime. But the day isn't over, it's just getting started. You still have chores, more prayers, more silence, more rules, and a meal that will make cardboard seem decadent. You sit back now, maybe picturing yourself with a shaved tonsure, mumbling in Latin, knees sore, nose drippy from the cold. This isn't the peaceful sanctuary you imagined. This is survival in the name of sanctity. And yet, you do it, day after day. The peace you came for, it's hidden behind discomfort, repetition, and relentless routine. And maybe, just maybe, under all that hardship, You start to find it. Your stomach growls, but you ignore it. Or at least you try. Because now it's time for breakfast, or what passes for it in this world. You walk quietly to the refectory, the monastery's dining hall. Long wooden tables stretch out beneath vaulted ceilings, and the air smells faintly of yesterday's broth and damp robes. No one speaks. Not even a good morning. The only sounds are the scrape of benches and the quiet clatter of wooden spoons. One monk, chosen for the week, reads aloud from scripture while the rest of you eat. That's right. Not only are you eating in silence, you're also getting a side of soul-scouring morality with your bland porridge. Hope you weren't planning to enjoy this. The meal is gruel thick, lukewarm, utterly flavorless. Maybe a slice of coarse bread. On special feast days, if you're lucky, a small wedge of cheese or a boiled egg might appear. Meat, forget about it. Most monastic orders banned it entirely, unless you were deathly ill. Some monks even believed that the pleasure of meat ignited carnal desires. One Benedictine chronicler wrote that beef stirs the body to lust, which, frankly, makes you look at cows a little differently now. The water is clean, at least most of the time. Wine is reserved for special occasions or certain regions. Some monasteries, especially in France or Italy, became quite good at winemaking. But that doesn't mean the average monk gets to sip Merlot under candlelight. You're more likely to be sipping tepid barley broth while trying not to sneeze. Once the meal ends, you stand together and chant a prayer of thanks. Still no talking. Then it's off to your daily labor. Because monastic life isn't just about praying, it's about working, constantly. Manual labor was seen as holy, a way to purify the soul through sweat, and there's no shortage of tasks. Today you've been assigned to the vegetable garden. The soil is wet and heavy, the mist hanging low over the cabbages. You bend down and begin weeding, your fingers quickly going numb. You're surrounded by other brothers in silence, each lost in thought or humming quiet prayers. Elsewhere in the monastery, someone is baking bread, someone else is mending robes. A few are down by the stream, washing laundry on flat stones. And in the scriptorium, the sacred writing room, monks are painstakingly copying manuscripts by hand, letter by letter, with ink made from oak galls and soot. One mistake, and you're scraping the parchment with a knife to fix it. No backspace here. It's easy to romanticize the scriptorium monks in warm glow, writing wisdom for the ages, but the reality is carpal tunnel, eye strain, and near-permanent ink stains. Some scribes went blind in their later years. Others included snarky little notes in the margins of manuscripts on my hand. And this parchment is too rough. One even wrote, "Thank God it will soon be dark." Historians still argue whether all this daily grind led to deeper spirituality, or just spiritual burnout. Some monks certainly reached states of profound inner peace. Others snuck off behind the herb garden to nap. Afternoons might bring Lectio Divina, slow, meditative reading of scripture or more work. It depends on your abbey's rhythm. Some monasteries were more lenient, others rigidly structured, but none were leisurely. You might spend your hours repairing tools, binding books, or helping in the infirmary. Your back hurts, your hands are raw, and still, the bells ring, calling you again to prayer. That makes, 5 sessions of prayer already today, with 2 more to go. One quirky fact: some monasteries trained ravens to deliver messages between buildings. One particularly clever abbey in Germany had a raven who would steal bread from the kitchen and leave pebbles in its place, technically still a transaction. Later in the day, you gather for Vespers, your evening prayer. The golden light filters in through stained glass slits, casting dancing colors across the stone floor. It's probably the most beautiful part of your day. But even here, as the chanting begins and your voice merges with the others, your knees ache from kneeling. You glance at Brother Thomas, who's nodding off. Again, he does this almost every You're convinced he's perfected the art of praying with his eyes closed and dreams full tilt. Meanwhile, you're fighting to keep your mind from wandering back to memories of spiced meat pies or warm fires. The silence continues. You might not have spoken a word to another human all day. Monks lived in communio, yes, but also in isolation. It was a strange paradox. Together, but alone. When Compline finally arrives, your final prayer, you are spiritually worn and physically depleted. You shuffle to the dormitory. There's no privacy. Dozens of you sleep in a single hole, side by side on narrow beds. One snorer can doom the night for everyone. And there's always one. You slip under your blanket and stare at the ceiling beams. Maybe you say a final prayer. Maybe you wonder what your old village is like now. Is your cousin still stealing apples? Is your sister married? Do they miss you? Are they warmer than you? Some monks joined for faith. Others were second sons sent by noble families who didn't want to split their land. Some were orphans, others fugitives, hiding in plain sight. Everyone here has a reason, but after enough days of silence, gruel, and aching muscles, the reason starts to blur. You close your eyes as the final bell echoes no dreams tonight. You're too tired. The next morning, the same cold bell yanks you out of sleep like a divine alarm clock with no snooze button. Your body protests, but your training or maybe just the fear of punishment gets you moving. Prayer first, as always. Then it's back into the rhythm of labor. Today, you're assigned to the woodpile. Someone's got to chop firewood for the kitchens in the infirmary. Even if the fire barely makes a dent in the monastery's icy draft, you grab a heavy axe and head toward the edge of the property. The sky is grey. The mud grabs at your sandal. Rain from the night before has turned the path into a slippery mess. Your hands blister fast, even with gloves. The repetitive swing, crack, and thud of wood cutting wears on your joints. And remember, you still have 6 more hours of chores ahead after this. You take a break for a moment, leaning on the axe, and glance back toward the chapel where another bell tolls. Time for the mid-morning prayer. You trudge back, trying not to slip in the muck. It's easy to forget, in all this spiritual busywork, that many monasteries were also thriving centers of economic life. That's your mainstream historical fact of the day. Monasteries often owned vast amounts of land, renting to peasants, growing crops, raising sheep, and even managing breweries or vineyards. Some abbots were essentially landlords in brown robes. But back to your labor. After you're sent to help Brother Martin in the cowshed. This, of course, means shoveling manure. The cows don't seem bothered by the smell, but you're beginning to understand why monks shave the tops of their heads so the stink has somewhere to escape. Martin, by the way, is a gentle giant, barely speaks, but always manages to sneak you a stale crust of bread when the gruel gets to grueling. He's one of the few comforts here-acquired friendship built on shared misery and mutual understanding. You don't need words, just a nod, a shrug, and a shared grunt when the wheelbarrow tips. Later, you'll move to the scriptorium. Ah, a break, you think, but you're wrong. Copying texts is hard. You dip your quill into ink and scratch each letter with painful precision onto parchment. There's no room for flair, this isn't. It's replication. The air smells of wax, ink, and strained concentration. The manuscript you're copying is a theological treatise, paragraph after paragraph of Latin logic loops that make your brain leak out your ears. You stifle a yawn. The monk next to you, Brother Geoffrey, is muttering to himself. He always does this, when he concentrates, whispering the words like he's trying to trap them in the ink. One time, he fell asleep mid-copy, and left a perfect ink blot right in the middle of Sanctus. Your fingers cramp. You shake them out, only to be glared at by the prior, who silently gestures for you to keep going. And you try to stay awake, though the candlelight flickers, your eyes blur, and each line starts to look just like the one before it. Historians still argue whether monks genuinely found peace in this repetition, or if it was simply a psychological survival mechanism. Maybe by focusing so hard on the external, they drowned out the internal. But don't assume your efforts are purely spiritual. Some of these books are valuable, very valuable. A single Bible, handwritten and illuminated, could be worth as much as a manor house. You're not just preserving knowledge, you're producing high-end goods, albeit unpaid and very much unappreciated. By late afternoon, the abbey courtyard is a hive of activity. Chickens squawk, a cart creaks by with sacks of grain. A novice monk is being scolded for sneaking extra bread. Again, you catch his eye. He grins. You both know the gruel isn't enough for a growing boy. Back-breaking labor continues. The garden needs tending. The drains need clearing. And someone broke a wheel on the water cart. Of course, it's you who's sent to fix it. You fetch tools, crouch in the mud, and try to repair it without losing your temper. A light joke breaks through your exhaustion. At least it's not raining. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, it starts to drizzle. Brother Martin raises an eyebrow. You both laugh, quietly, of course. There's no room for vanity here. No time to preen. Your robe is stained, your sandals worn, your tonsure itches. And yet, despite the grime and discipline, there's a strange rhythm to it all. A silent heartbeat of devotion beneath the surface noise of chores. Later, after dinner, which is, once again, soup with a side of eternal humilitia, assigned night watch. Every monk takes a turn. You wrap yourself in an extra cloak and patrol the monastery grounds with a lantern. The flame sputters. Shadows stretch. The chapel looms in silence. You check the gates, the granary, the barn. All seems well. But sometimes, you swear you hear whispers that don't belong. Maybe it's the wind through the stones. Or maybe it's Brother Jeffrey again, he talks in his sleep. You return just before midnight. Your muscles ache, your eyelids sag, and your soul feels scraped thin. But as you climb into bed straw, poking your ribs, you realize you made it through another day. And tomorrow, it begins again. Morning again. And by now, you're convinced that time inside this monastery doesn't flow at loops. You wake, you pray, you work, you eat something suspiciously beige, you pray again, and somewhere in between. You start to wonder if sainthood is just extreme boredom with better branding. Today, however, you're not heading to the fields or the scriptorium. Today, you're in the chapter house. This is where the whole community gathers to confess sins, receive punishments, and hear announcements. Think of it like the medieval version of a performance review, except instead of bonuses, you might get whipped. You sit on a cold bench while the abbot calls names. One by one, monks rise to confess. The sins are usually small, nodding off during prayer, letting your thoughts wander to worldly pleasures, maybe grumbling while cleaning latrines. Still, each is addressed with solemn ritual. Some brothers kneel, hands clasped, heads bowed. Others mutter just above a whisper. Then it's your turn. You stand, your knees clicking, and admit that yesterday, you mentally replayed the taste of roasted duck from your prime monastery life. The room is silent. The abbot nods once. You're penitent. 2 extra hours in the garden and recite the Psalms of Repentance. This isn't about guilt, it's about purification. The idea is to catch the little sins before they become big ones. You are, after all, trying to live like Christ. Even if Christ probably never had to argue with Brother Jeffrey about the correct way to stir porridge. The punishments get weirder. You remember Brother Alred, a kind man with bad timing. He once whispered a joke during Lord Something about how the choirmaster's chant sounded like a dying goat. For this lapse, he was sentenced to a week of silent meals with no eye contact. Historians still argue whether this kind of social isolation was spiritually corrective or psychologically brutal. Probably both. Another time, a monk was found hiding honey cakes under his mattress. His punishment: a week of standing through every service without sitting once. Your knees hurt, just remembering it. And then there are the confessions that shake the room. You've seen a brother fall to his knees, weeping, babbling about impure dreams, or memories of a girl he saw when he was 16. That same monk shaved his head even further the next day, like removing hair could erase desire. Some monasteries practiced self-flagellation, whipping oneself, as penance for sinful thoughts. Others used less dramatic methods, sleeping on the floor, fasting longer than usual, or wearing uncomfortable garments. One eccentric order in Spain used shirts lined with coarse horsehair. You've tried it once. You never forgot. A quirky little tidbit. There were stories, some likely exaggerated, of monks sleeping in open coffins to remind themselves of mortality. Memento mori, as they said. Remember, you must die. Now there's a lullaby for your spiritual insomnia. After the chapter meeting, you're pulled aside by the prior. There's a guest arriving soon, some nobleman seeking shelter and guidance. You're chosen to help prepare his quarters, which really means cleaning out the guest cell, changing the straw, and scrubbing the basin till it doesn't smell like boiled leeks. The guest arrives near sunset. He's dressed finely, with rings on his fingers and a fur-lined cloak. The contrast is jarring, like a silk napkin at a mud pie contest. He's polite enough, but clearly uncomfortable. His eyes flit around the walls as if expecting something to lurch out from behind a tapestry. He offers a donation to the monastery, then joins you all for Vespers. He doesn't chant. He doesn't kneel. His boots squeak on the stone, but he watches curious, maybe even envious. That night, you overhear him speaking with the abbot. He talks about the burdens of wealth, of sons who disobey, of court politics, of guilt. You're not supposed to listen, but the walls are thin and your ears are bored, and in a strange way, you feel pity. Because as hard as this life is, at least it's honest. Your pain has a purpose. His seems tangled in gold. Later in the dormitory, you whisper this thought to Brother Martin. He grunts in agreement. That's basically a philosophical essay, coming from him. As you lie back, your mind drifts. The punishments, the guilt, the endless rituals, maybe, they aren't just about suffering. Maybe they're about focus. The outside world is chaos. Here, at least, The rules don't change. Still, you wonder what would happen if you broke one. Just once, snuck into the kitchen and devoured an entire cheese wheel, or shouted during matin, or ran barefoot through the cloister, laughing. Would they forgive you? Would you forgive yourself? But you won't. You'll wake, pray, work, and wait for some scrap of grace to fall quietly from heaven, maybe tomorrow. By now, you've memorized every creak in the monastery's wooden floorboards. You can navigate the cloisters blindfolded. You've developed a sixth sense for knowing when the next bell will ring, and you hate that you're almost proud of it. But if you thought monks were peaceful, predictable, and free from the world's mess, surprise. Just beneath the surface of the monastery's holy silence lies a steady simmer of politics, rivalry, and the occasional act of sabotage that would make a Game of Thrones character raise an eyebrow. It starts subtly. Brother Anselm gets promoted to cellare the monk in charge of the monastery's food stores, despite Brother Thomas clearly being next in line. No one talks about it, of course. Talking is discouraged. But the silence gets heavier. Suddenly, the soup is saltier. The cellar door mysteriously sticks. Anselm's robe goes missing from the drying line. Coincidence? Sure, let's pretend. Historians still argue whether monasteries were truly bastions of spiritual equality, or if they simply mirrored the feudal hierarchies outside their walls. Abbots often held enormous power, and some were even appointed by kings. Nobles pulled strings. Families made donations to secure their son's position in a prestigious abbey. Holiness, it turns out, often had a hefty price tag. You remember when a local lord sent his Kazana-pampered teenager with a half-grown beard and an ego bigger than the cathedral bell to learn humility. Within weeks, he was mysteriously assigned to the scriptorium, far away from manual labor, and served extra honey with his bread. Divine favor, he called it. Divine nepotism, you muttered. One day, you stumble upon the abbot arguing quietly, but intensely, with a visiting bishop. The conversation is layered with pleasantries, but the tension is thick enough to slice with a communion wafer. Disputes over land ownership, questions about tithes, a missing shipment of wine. Apparently, sanctity does not prevent shady accounting. Your duties take you into the archives that week, helping sort old records. You discover that the monastery once owned twice as much land but sold off large portions decades ago to why? The notes are vague, ink smeared, names redacted. One entry mentions gifts exchanged under which sounds lovely until you remember that's often how bribes were handled. And then there's the case of Brother William. Once a rising star, he knew Latin, Greek, and even a bit of Arabic, rare knowledge for the time. People whispered that he might be abbot one day. Then, one morning, he was simply gone, disappeared. The official story claimed he'd taken a vow of pilgrimage, but a novice confided in you that William had uncovered forged relics in the reliquary. The bone of St. Crispin was, apparently, a sheep's ankle. That night, William had argued with the sacristan, loudly. The next day, empty bed, no farewell. A quirky tidbit for you. Some medieval monasteries claim to own holy relics with miraculous powers, teeth from saints, vials of Christ's blood, splinters from the true cross. But the market for these relics was rife with fraud. One French abbey allegedly had 4 separate heads of John the Baptist. That's either a miracle or a very unfortunate case of identity theft. Back in your world, tensions rise when Brother Hugo, who manages the monastery's vineyards, starts locking the wine cellar. He insists it's to prevent. Everyone knows it's because Brother Matthew has been sneaking sips. Soon Matthew is reassigned to the apiary, where he promptly gets stung and develops that looks suspiciously like divine judgment. Still, the bickering rarely breaks into open conflict. Passive-aggressive is the default monastic communication style. A missing sandal here, a miscopied prayer there. Brother Martin once carved a sarcastic face into your favorite stool. You carved one back. In this holy arms race, everyone's a little guilty. One night, during Camblan, the candlelight flickers in an eerie way. The chants sound lower, slower. You feel a chill knot, just from the cold. Something about the room feels off. Later, you learn that Brother Jerome, the novice master, collapsed in his quarters. The rumor, poisoned wine. Official word, illness from overwork. Of course, you lie in bed that night, eyes open, listening. The soft snoring of your brothers. The wind howling faintly through stone. Somewhere out there, wolves cry. Somewhere inside, so do secrets. And despite all this, despite the corruption, the favoritism, the quiet treacheries, you'll wake up the next morning and do it all again. You pray, you scrub, you copy, you bow. Because this monastery, for all its flaws, is still your home. The walls may whisper lies, but they also echo prayers. Both somehow matter. You're coughing before you even open your eyes. The air is thick with smoke and something worse. A sickness has crept into the monastery, and no one's admitting how bad it is. But you can feel it in your lungs, in the silence, in the eyes of Brother Martin, who hasn't spoken in 2 days. At first, they call it a seasonal fever. Then they start moving the sick to the infirmary. Then the gravedigger is given a new robe and told not to bother washing his hands. The bell tolls more frequently, now not for prayer, but for death. The plague has arrived. This is your mainstream historical fact. Medieval monasteries were hit hard by outbreaks like the Black Death. Many lost over half their monks in a matter of weeks. Their rigid communal structure shared dorms, meals. Work made them perfect incubators for disease. You try to carry on. You clean the refectory. You read from Psalms. You bring broth to the sick, wearing a rag over your nose that does absolutely nothing. The prior blesses the beds with holy water that smells like vinegar. No one's laughing anymore. Even Brother Geoffrey has stopped much. And then it gets worse. Brother Anselm claims the fever is punishment for hidden sins. He accuses Brother Hugo of hoarding meat in the cellar. Voices rise. The abbot intervenes, but too late. The peace is shattered. Some monks flee. Others lock themselves in their cells and refuse to come out. You watch Brother Thomas pile books in front of his door like a makeshift fortress. Historians still argue whether monks who broke their vows during plagues were cowards or just human. Either way, you don't blame them. One night, you're awoken by a scream. Brother Matthew face pale, eyes wild as convulsing near the cloister. A few gather to help, but the rest stay in their beds, paralyzed by fear. No one wants to be next. And then, something strange begins to happen. Rumors of possession, whispers in the night. One monk claims he saw a demon walking the garden, trailing cinders and whispering Latin backward. You want to laugh, but deep down, something primal shivers in your gut. A fringe tidbit. In some monasteries, monks believed that demons slipped in during sickness, not just to claim Bediza but souls. Certain abbeys even kept hidden exorcism manuals, just in case. Yours does. You've seen it, bound in dark leather, locked behind the sacristy. The line between spiritual and physical illness blurs. Suddenly everything is suspect. A fevered dream, a devil's whisper, a sore throat, a sign of judgment. You're exhausted. Spiritually, mentally, physically. But the chores don't stop. The prayers continue. The bells keep ringing. You bury Brother Jerome at dawn. You dig his grave with your own hands. The earth cold and heavy. You weep. But only for a second. There are more beds to tend. And then, one day, Brother Martin disappears. No farewell, no prayer, just gone. You suspect he escaped. It's rare, but it happens. Some monks run. They scale the walls at night and vanish into the forest. Historians have found records of monks reappearing in towns under false names, living as laymen, marrying, starting over. One man who fled his abbey in England was later found in Paris working as a playwright, of all things. Maybe Martin made it, maybe he didn't. You think about leaving too. You think about it a lot. But something duty, fear, guilt, or just inertia keeps you here. Eventually, the sickness wanes. The coughing stops. The beds empty not because they've healed, but because the occupants are buried. The air clears. The silence returns. Heavier now. You walk the halls, thinner than before. Your robe hangs off. You're like a sail. Your hair is grayer, but you're still here. The abbot calls a mass of remembrance. You chant with the others, voices like ghosts, and for a brief moment, the sorrow is shared. The monastery, for all its faults, still knows how to mourn. In the stillness after the service, you find yourself kneeling not because of duty, or punishment, or routine but because something in your soul bends stored hope. You whisper a prayer. You rise, and you continue. Word count, 1077 white. The candlelight flickers gently now, casting soft golden shapes on the stone walls. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees just beyond the monastery gate. You can almost hear the creak of the bell rope swaying slightly in the breeze. Its toll finally done for the night. The halls are quiet. No chanting, no footstep, just a long, slow breath of rest. In the dormitory, the remaining monks lie still, wrapped in their woolen blankets, each one nestled into his own corner of silence. You lie down too, on that straw-stuffed mattress. It's not comfortable, Not really, but it's familiar. And that tonight is enough. Your body relaxes. Your hands, once cracked from labor, rest gently on your chest. Your thoughts drift like incense, rising, softening, fading. There are no more chores, no more confessions, no more secrets, just the steady hush of the monastery exhaling. Maybe Brother Martin made it to the woods. Maybe you will too. Or maybe you'll stay. Because somehow, in the rhythm of bells, the cold of stone, the weight of silence, you've found something close to peace. Or at least, something quieter than the chaos outside these walls. And tomorrow, if it comes, you'll rise again. You'll kneel. You'll chant. You'll tend the garden. Not because you have to, but because it's what you do. A life carved out of repetition, of discipline, of quiet, persistent grace. For now, rest. Let the wind hum its lullaby against the chapel stones. Let the candles burn low. Let the world go quiet. And sleep.